Before we start, if you're new here and enjoy the video, be sure to subscribe for more NBA content like this. I'm trying to hit 10,000 subscribers by August, so all support would be greatly appreciated. Trae Young has become one of the NBA's top young stars ever since his rookie season, and whilst he was heavily hated on to begin with due to his slow start, he's now a fan favourite. He was so loved that he was voted into the All-Star game this year and started over players like Ben Simmons, Kyle Lowry and Jimmy Butler. This caused outrage in quite a few fans' minds, and it started the debate that Trae Young is simply not that level of good and is overrated. So, is he actually? In today's video, I'm going to be looking at the arguments of Trae Young being overrated and giving you my opinion on whether I agree with them or not, and finally concluding with my overall view of Trae Young and if I personally believe he is overrated or not. Before we start, I always have to say this in these types of videos: overrated does not mean a player is bad, it simply means they are not as good as they are made out to be. By me saying a player is overrated, it doesn't mean I'm saying they're trash. It's not me discrediting what they've been able to do in the league, it's me saying they are being raised to a standard that they simply aren't on. Anyway, with that all out of the way, be sure to subscribe to help me hit 10k, we are so close to that goal. But with that all being said, let's talk about Trae Young.
Lucas.
Trae Young had a breakout sophomore season. He averaged a ridiculous 29.6 points per game and nearly 10 assists per game, which is just insane, and these were both huge improvements from his rookie year, averaging 10 more points and an extra assist per night. He also shot better this year as well, with his effective field goal percentage improving by about 4%, 48% to 51.9%. These phenomenal stats and other reasons gave Trae Young the opportunity to start in the All-Star game this year, which in your first All-Star appearance is very impressive regardless of if he deserved it or not. Unfortunately for Trae, the Hawks struggled to win this season, winning only 20 of their 67 games played, which leads me to the first common argument about Trae Young being overrated: he doesn't win. Many people view Trae as overrated, as though he puts up these magnificent numbers. The Hawks are still one of the worst teams in the NBA, going 20-47 this season and finishing with a bottom 5 record in the league. However, I'm not really sure this is completely Trae's fault. Obviously, if he's a superstar like many people like to view him as, he'd make things work with his current roster, but if you really look at it, the Hawks roster is simply not up to scratch. Apart from John Collins and towards the end of the season Cam Reddish, the Hawks roster is pretty terrible, and Young often has to carry the load at times. It was even reported that during the season, Young was getting more and more frustrated with his team, which is why at the trade deadline this year, the Hawks made quite a few moves in order to try get him some help. A stat that proves Trae's elite value to the Hawks is estimated wins added to a team. The name of the stat is self-explanatory, and Trae Young ranks inside the top 10 for that stat in the entire NBA, with 13.7 estimated wins added to the Hawks. Basically, without him, the Hawks win 7 games this season. Obviously though, when another guy in your draft class is leading their team to the playoffs and is an MVP discussion, it does raise a few questions about you and whether you are really that impactful to your team, or if your stats are just a bit empty and perhaps inflated. And that's an issue a lot of people have with Trae Young. My overall thoughts on this argument: in some ways yes, Trae Young is overrated for not leading his team to enough wins, but place another similar player to him in this situation, I doubt they'd do much better with the Hawks' shocking roster. So though Trae could do better, I'm not overly mad at him for struggling to begin his career in the wins category. Another reason why people see Trae Young as overrated is because his stats are inflated and maybe empty, and I actually agree with this one. Trae Young is notorious for getting a lot of his points and stats in the final term and late in games, and often this is when the Hawks are down big and the game is virtually over. Some stats to back this up is Young averages the fewest points in his games in the first quarter and averages the most in the fourth quarter. He also shoots the worst from 3 in the first quarter of games, and his defensive box plus minus, which is already terrible, and I'll talk more about it in a bit, is worst in the first quarter also. Trae Young also shoots his worst from the field when down in a close game, so down 6 points or less. You could argue that Trae Young is feeling out his opponent in the first quarter and trying to set up his teammates, but he shoots 4.6 times in the first quarter, just under a quarter of his 20 shots per game. With this all being said though, you can say Trae can make up for his slow starts and is a clutch performer in the fourth, but most of the time with Atlanta, it's too little too late, and these stats I've shown really show how he negatively impacts his team. So for this category, yes, I believe Trae Young has empty stats, and for that reason, his averages of 30 and 9 per game can be deemed overrated. Some people see Trae as overrated due to his poor efficiency, and this I can kind of agree with, but even then, I'm not too upset with it. Trae does shoot a mediocre 43% from the field and is 79th in the league in true shooting percentage with 59%, but I don't think this matters too much. Obviously, a team wants their superstar to be efficient and consistent, but at this point, I don't believe the Hawks have given Trae the correct guides in order for him to do that. At times, Trae has to force up some bad shots just because his teammates just aren't doing enough for him to get a good look. To me, I think over time, Trae's efficiency will improve, and it already is. If we look at his first month of the NBA, progressively until now, Trae Young is steadily improving that area of his game. Again, he could be more consistent, more efficient, but at this point of his career, I don't think it's that big of a concern, and in my eyes, does not make him overrated. Finally, probably the biggest reason as to why people view Trae Young as overrated is due to his atrocious defense. Trae Young is literally a bottom 3 defender in the entire league and has the 3rd worst defensive box plus minus to back that claim up. Even though Trae can be an elite level offensive performer, if he can't be somewhat respectable on defense, his impact is going to take a significant hit. No matter what he does on offense, he's simply going to be a liability on defense at all times, and that is a huge problem for Atlanta. Due to his weak frame, he gets bodied often by stronger star guards and has trouble keeping up with them, and is often the target player on defense. Opposition teams try to expose him as much as possible. In my eyes, the terrible defense Young produces does make him overrated in my eyes simply because it reduces his overall impact. Offense isn't the only thing in basketball, and if you can't play defense on at least a somewhat respectable level, it will lower your overall impact on the court heavily, especially if you're as inconsistent as Young is. So yes, I do agree with this argument here. So those are all the arguments for why people believe Trae Young is overrated. Let me know if I missed any below, but with that all being said, in my opinion, is Trae Young overrated? I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to go with yes, he is, but only slightly, and as I mentioned at the start of the video, this does not mean he is bad at all. I don't think his lack of winning makes him overrated, as it's really not his fault, and though he could do more to help Atlanta win, can we really blame him for their limited success all that much? His poor efficiency isn't a huge issue to me either, as I do think he's improving in that area, he just needs to be more consistent. But the two big issues I have with Trae is his defense and his stats. On paper, his stats are attracting, they look like elite level stats, and this then raises the question, why aren't they contributing to wins? The reality is, however, the bulk of these stats come late during games, and this usually means when the Hawks are down big in the fourth quarter, which gives reason for the stats being so-called empty. Trae's defense is also one of the worst in the league for a player, and I've said it before and I'll repeat myself here. Even if you're amazing on offense but can't be respectable on defense, your on-court impact is going to take a severe hit, and we can see that with Trae Young as he becomes an absolute liability on the defensive end. So overall, yes, Trae Young is slightly overrated. With that said, this can change easily. If Trae Young improves his defense, becomes more consistent, and works on his game overall, I have no doubt in a year or two, people will rank him correctly, and I think he'd be deserving of an all-star starter spot. As of right now though, he's not on that level, and I think us NBA fans need to stop overhyping him. Having a guy like Luka Doncic also in your draft class doesn't make things easy, but if we all settle down and realize how good Trae Young is actually, I think we can analyze him a lot more accurately and fairly. Unfortunately though, he is overhyped just a bit, and that leads me to believe that Trae Young is in fact overrated. And that will conclude the video. What do you guys think of this? Is Trae Young overrated in your opinion, or is he fairly ranked in your eyes? Let me know all your thoughts down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop it a like and subscribe, but with that being said, I am out. Peace.